So, thank you so much, Corey, for joining us today. Uh, and thank you, everyone watching, for joining us too. So, just as a short introduction, my name's Phyllis. I'm the content marketing manager at Condense. And today we have our guest speaker, Cory Lebson, who's going to be sharing his insights and his experiences on empathy and the importance of empathy in UX research. So, Cory, I think I'll just pass it on to you.
Sure, thanks. So basically, I've been a UX researcher since forever. Feels that way. Anyway, I started last year was actually my 30th year as a UX researcher, and I've been doing UX research, really since then. I've been a freelance researcher with my own little micro business since 2008. And really, since then I've done like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, among as well as research related to UX community, UX careers, and also empathy. And that's one of the things that I've certainly spoken about, and just did my second edition of a LinkedIn Learning course on empathy that just came out this month. And yeah, it's something that's certainly very, very exciting to me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for giving a introduction of yourself, Cory. And maybe we can just dive right into talking more about empathy.
Sure.
So, I think the first question to even just talk about why is empathy so relevant to discuss right now is, it's in 2025. Why do you think empathy is an important skill?
So just to baseline it a little bit, I'd say, empathy has always been part of the conversation, in design and development and so on, empathy for the users, empathy for the people using products and so on. So it's been a kind of a word we've certainly talked about. But come, 2025, there's a lot of, I'd say, ambient anxiety in the air. People are, whether it's politics or global warming or whatever. People are anxious. Certainly anxiety itself is a conversation. That has happened in the last couple of years and been more people have been more free to discuss that. But whatever it is, there's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot that people are uh, just feel negative emotions for. And the idea that we can be empathetic, it's all the more salient now. It's all the more pressing now to just care about other people. I mean, I think it's one of the most important things, one of the most important, perhaps soft skills, but also it's one of the most important just ways to be a colleague. I mean, in a work life, but also in a personal life too, with friends and family, certainly as well. But really, we keep coming back to empathy. It's just what we need. It doesn't matter what people's beliefs are, or anything. Particularly when you're working with people. When you're working with people who have different beliefs, different ideas, are from different cultures. It doesn't matter. That empathy is the glue. It's the to feel good about for everyone to feel good about who they work with and what they're doing.
Absolutely. And I think, especially, I think in the age we are in today, um, and given, I mean, it's nothing new really, it's been around for a while, but AI is kind of taking, it feels like it's taking over so many industries, taking over the world in a sense.
Yeah.
How does empathy fit into that kind of context?
I would say empathy is what makes us human. So AI, really can simulate that empathy. AI can create what sounds like empathetic responses. It can understand the simulation of emotion. It can understand tone because certain words are used, or exclamations are used, or punctuation, or whatever, but it's not human, right? AI is an algorithm. It's or a series of algorithms, and I think that particularly people who do things like user experience, who do UX research, who are really thinking about the end users of products. Um, Empathy is our superpower. It's not something that AI can replace. I mean, sure, maybe in the future, there's some further future where we have this generalized intelligence, that is actually intelligent, but but not now. Certainly not with what's on the market today. And if you really kind of dig into it, any product that's out there, it doesn't really have emotion. At best, it's a simulation, and I think that kind of gives us in user experience some job security, perhaps, for at least the next couple of years.
I definitely agree with that. And I actually did your LinkedIn course and I found it very insightful. And one of the things I heard in you say in the LinkedIn course was that empathy is a choice and it can be cultivated. And that was really interesting to me because I'd never really thought of empathy as something that could be developed. I
Mhm.
always saw it as something that someone maybe is naturally predisposed to or not. So I'd actually love to hear you share a little bit more about that. How can someone cultivate and choose to be empathetic?
Sure, sure. So, I mean, I think as a baseline, whether through nature, nurture, whatever, everyone's starting at a different natural level of empathy. That's there's a different starting point. That's just kind of our baseline. That said, it doesn't matter where that starting point actually is because paying attention. I mean, you can learn to some extent that empathy, by paying attention to things. Paying attention to tone, to body language, to kind of micro expressions of someone's eyes, or just really kind of it's that paying attention aspect, and it's the kind of validation too. As a UX researcher, I'm certainly in a position a lot to probe. But even that very like not kind of well, what exactly do you mean? What are you feeling? But it's really more like oh, so it sounds like this is a situation, and you can validate stuff very easily. To say, okay, am I correctly perceiving emotions? Am I not correctly perceiving emotions of other people? And then the empathy part is the can I feel it myself? I mean, to some extent, I think if you can accurately perceive the emotions, you can feel it. You can bring it inside and feel it, and that feeling part is where the empathy comes in and differentiates it from say sympathy, which is also derived the same way, but without maybe the that internal feeling part.
And so is it possible to have like a mindset of empathy, like having an empathetic mindset? I think that was also something um, I heard you had said, and I was wondering how do you get that? How do you get an empathetic mindset?
I mean, it really starts with that paying attention part. Paying attention to other people, keeping it in the front of your mind. I mean, making that conscious effort. There's a lot of talk, about focusing on the here and now. Like as a meditative kind of thing, is it like to quell anxiety. Focus on where you are, not what could possibly happen. Whatever. And that same thing applies to kind of that empathetic mindset, which is keep in the front of your mind. Okay, here and now, the people in front of me, the people I'm interacting with, or I mean, it doesn't have to be in front; it could be virtual too. But just keeping it in front of mind. Thinking about what are they feeling. If I say something, does it seem to do have I added positive emotion? Have I said something that has made negative emotion? Trying to validate that too, and not go off in an anxious circle. Oh no, I upset this person, and it's whatever. But really, it's just kind of keeping it in the front of your mind. And now we're talking about it kind of at a personal level, but then taking that to the UX to the business context too, and certainly on the coworker level as well. But then taking it to the the people who use the products. Saying, okay, let me try to understand, let me talk with them, let me understand them, let me even, try to feel what they're feeling by looking at log data, a transcript of a conversation with a support technician. It doesn't matter. I think all of that comes together, and by keeping it in the front of your mind, I mean, you're helping everybody. You're helping yourself. You're helping your friends and family. You're helping your coworkers. And as a user experience person, and particularly as a researcher, but any user experience person, or anyone who's kind of really involved in products, you're helping those end users as well, by really kind of focusing and framing this mindset.
I love that you actually brought in that we, of course, user researchers talking with users, it's important to be empathetic to the users, but also the need to be empathetic internally with your colleagues, with stakeholders. Because I was actually just thinking that user researchers, once they've done the research projects, once they've collected the data, that's kind of only half of the job done, right? It's you have the research and the results, but what do you do with it? Like the other half of the job then is getting that research to your stakeholders, making sure that the research is actually being used to make better informed business decisions. And so I'd also love to hear your thoughts on some best practices on how to present research to your stakeholders in a way that not only conveys the information, but also the empathy in a compelling way.
Sure. I mean, really, storytelling is one of the most effective forms of communication. I think since the dawn of humanity, people were telling stories, right? Around, being able to convey stories and not just facts and figures is one of the most critical things I think that a user researcher can bring to the table. Really, is to say, okay, this is what happened, but let's string things together and frame it as a narrative. And part of that narrative is the emotion of it. That emotion can be found, in words. It can be found in an explanation of a slide deck. But it can also be found through video clips. I certainly like video clips, because particularly when you can capture the emotion of a person, where they 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 are part of the storytelling themselves. The clip is part of the storytelling itself, and that's probably the most effective form of getting the message across. And certainly it doesn't discount the facts and figures. I mean, certainly understanding facts and figures, in survey research, you might be able to give statistically significant data, and that's all valuable too. But I think the most valuable piece of that communication is in the storytelling itself.
I mean, as someone in marketing, I 100% agree with you. I love storytelling, and I also feel like it's just one of the most impactful ways to convey something to someone else. And you brought up something about like facts and figures and such, and I was wondering, it does make a little more sense, I think, to convey qualitative data, qualitative information in a storytelling kind of format. Is it possible to convey quantitative data also in a storytelling format?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so you can still string a narrative around quantifiable things, around statistics. I mean, statistics shouldn't be this dry, boring sounding thing. And you should present. I mean, quantitative data itself should be presented in that same storytelling way. It might be a little harder, because you've got to do a little more work to string that story together. That said, even let's say talk about survey, we'll have a freeform box or freeform boxes, and you could do. I mean, AI can give us some like baseline affect, in the qualitative data, but really kind of going through it, you can get kind of good emotional quotes out of it. You can certainly get things in your quantitative data. There is qualitative data, so it's a combination. I mean, that storytelling around the quant plus the the pulling out and extracting of the qualitative. There often is a lot to choose from. You just need to take the time to go through those freeform fields, which could take a while. But doing it with humanity as well, not just using the AI to kind of summarize those kinds of fields.
Mhm. And sort of in this vein, uh, something I've also been considering is, user researchers will sometimes also present deliverables. They'll produce deliverables like uh, customer user journey maps and things like personas. And I think personas is something that's quite interesting to me because it's something I've been hearing in the research design space as not exactly controversial, but I've been hearing some, people have different kinds of feelings and thoughts about personas, how accurate, how useful they really are. But as far as I understand, it's one of the ways that researchers are able to make data and information more empathetic to other people on their team. For example, for designers or product managers to have someone to design the product for in mind, right? And so, yeah, I'd love to also hear your thoughts on uh, how useful do you think personas are as a tool to try and trigger empathy?
I'm on the fence. On the one hand, I could say I've seen personas used very positively in a very kind of a it's a low percentage of the research. It's here, sure, some personas. They've been validated. They're emotive, certainly, and we haven't tried to create 50 of them. Like what? Like there's ridiculous numbers of personas I've seen. I've seen personas sitting at tables, big cardboard cutouts. Sometimes we go a little far. That said, it's one tool. It's one tool for reporting, for conveying empathy, and you know, sure, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt as long as it's not given great big salient, sometimes literally. But conversely, by default, if you say, do we need to create personas? I would more likely tip towards no than yes. That said, I've certainly done playing personas for clients when they want it, and totally fine. Um, but but um, but I think you can create that same emotive kind of feeling with stories, and you don't necessarily need the personas to do that. But again, if one were to create personas, I have actually asked AI, to create the proto persona for me. And then I go in and I just do lots of editing to it. Sometimes it's easy just to let them come up with a little, basically a template, with ChatGPT or whatever, giving it some baseline information. And then I would go in and add, I think, a more realistic layer of humanity to it. And I've also seen personas that avoid emotion. Okay, here's the user, who, by the way, has a 56% chance of using a mobile device and a 44% chance of using a desktop device. Has a 60, this kind of analytical persona. I don't see any point in that. I mean, you can give certainly analytics and percentages, but it doesn't have to be in the form of a persona. It doesn't add, I think, that emotive value.
I see. Yeah. And I think the example you gave of when you use AI to create like a template and then go in and adjust it, that sounds like a really awesome way to incorporate AI into your workflow actually
Yeah, and
as
that's
a
and
user
that
researcher.
that's really how I've used. I mean, or I found the most value in the Chat GPTs and Copilots and Gemini's and Claude, whatever, is really kind of make me a template kind of thing. Here's a situation, make me a template, and let me edit it. Because often it's just hard to get started on something, to start on a blank screen. And sometimes if you just get someone to create something, and just make sure that you go through every single part of it and aspect of it, and triple check that the AI stuff is not, it's something that's AI-ish that shouldn't be there is not there. Not that anything can't be AI-ish, but that needs to be limited, I think, and it becomes just very generic and less human, using certain AI catchphrases and so on and so forth. But certainly, I think in templates, and templates could, as a researcher, I've used them to create templates for scripts. For scripts, and then I go and do heavy modification. Uh, for recruit, like for screeners, for if I was at like a telephone screener, web screener, again templates. I think that that's a handy way to use it kind of as an effective tool. And then to our point about empathy, you're always whatever you're adding empathy, and otherwise you're adding your humanity kind of as a layer on top of that, and doing a lot of cleanup.
That sounds awesome. And so, yeah, continuing on with, I mean, the whole topic is empathy, but I think generally we've talked a lot about the benefits of empathy and having and exercising empathy as a UX researcher, but having empathy as a UX researcher can also result in some frustrations and pains as well, right?
Yeah.
And so you had said before that when you do research long enough, it's not about if you encounter people with negative emotions, but when. And so this is something that's kind of unavoidable for user researchers, and especially if they want to be empathetic user researchers. So, how does one manage this while still getting the data and all the things you need?
I'm sure. So basically, I think, yeah, I've certainly done plenty of research where people had emotions. I mean, if recruiting actual users of a product and they're angry about the existing product, that emotion could come out. I certainly did a lot of disaster research, disaster UX research, and people who just survived disasters in the last 2 or 3 months, and having them kind of talk about the experience, and so on. You see tears, you see frustration, and so on. Um, and part of it, I think, I believe. I mean, I remember when I started in UX, not UX, but human factors and so on. I learned rigorous methods where you stick to your script and you don't deviate from the script, and you make sure. I've even done the quote unquote voice of God kind of thing. Early in my career, where you put the person in a room, but you don't want to. I mean, this is before remote, but you put the person in a room, then you had a speaker, and it would come out and say, "Now your next task is this," and so on. But that kind of situation, took away that human part of it. And I really believe that it's okay to deviate from the script. It's okay. It's not when you're talking about quality. I know there's people who think, I've had stakeholders who think, qualitative stuff, qualitative conversations, qualitative research still needs to be statistically significant or so on and so forth. It's not true. Really, if you deviate from a script, it's not like you need to say, I use the exact same phrase with every person. Now I know my research is okay. You still, that depth is what you get, and the depth is different with every person anyway. So, it's, I find it better to lean into the emotion, to be able to give sympathy, to feel that empathy and provide that sympathy to the participants, to make them feel better. I'd rather do that and feel good about myself than, oh, too bad, too bad you're in tears over this thing. Let's move on to the next question. It's not, that's not, doesn't feel good, first of all, but also it doesn't affect your research anyway. You still get the research you need. I mean, I think qualitative research is pretty robust, in terms of being able to stay on track even without the same words or the same exact same conversations. You still get the information you need anyway, so might as well, all the more so, be able to communicate and to run with that empathy, and feel better about helping people, almost like a therapist, in some ways, but helping people feel better about themselves as well.
Yeah. And do you think there's ways to sort of even set the stage or create an environment that is more comfortable for people who are in that kind of mindset, I suppose, who are dealing with negative emotions. You mentioned like some disaster survivors. They've gone through traumatic experiences. Surely, are there ways to set the stage for them to make it easier for them to go through with the user interview?
Yeah, I mean, so really, it's I think moderating with kindness. You know, have a kind tone, be warm, be caring. You know, from the moment you meet the person, don't just be that analytical researcher. It's not necessary, and it can create more problems. But be caring from the outset. And that said, practice it with your colleagues too. You know, be caring all around. You know, and you know, have that mindset as well, and bring that into research. And you know, when in any situation, if you have participants who are angry or upset or whatever, do your best to make them feel better, even during the session. It's okay. You know, it's not messing with anything. It's not going to mess with anything. And if worst case, they're so emotional and it does mess with something, then say, okay, you know what, we're not going to use this. I mean, obviously you're still paying them. You're still running the session, you know, unless you feel like, oh no, they're so upset I can't. And either way, again, you're still paying them, for their time. But really just you know, go with it. You know, go run with it. Don't try to block that emotional aspect. And I think everything will be better off for it.
Definitely. And I think this also is this makes me think about actually something you said earlier, that empathy is not the same as sympathy.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, if you think of a movie, or a TV show, you know, when I think when you're watching the show and a character gets upset or hurts themselves or whatever, and you're like, oh yeah, I understand they're upset because this thing happened. That makes sense. Fine. But when you really get into the show is when they get upset or they hurt themselves, and you're like, oh my gosh, I totally understand this has happened to me. I feel it, you know, inside, and you know that's really where the empathy lies. Like you said, it's that it's kind of that feeling inside of you.
I think this is also really important for trying to understand people that would just be different from you, right? And it, I've seen that you've posted, not recently, but you've started talking about how you got diagnosed with ADHD
Yeah,
and how this has impacted your approach to UX research. And you actually talked about how you feel like it's actually helped you in carrying out your research. And I'd really like to hear more about that.
sure. So it was so last year. Last year I turned 50, and I got this book. ADHD is awesome. It just came out by the Holderness, Penn and Kim Holderness, and I read the book. Ostensibly because I have family members who have ADHD, and not surprising, it's genetic. You know, I read the book, and as I'm reading the chapters, I'm like, wow, this is me. This is me. Huh? Sounds like me too. This sounds like me too. I started taking notes about it. Then, you know, after I read that, I went to someone who specialized, a therapist who specialized in ADHD. And, you know, really, you know, as we dove into it, you know, really, I could look back, you know, the last 50, maybe not 50 years, maybe the last 40 years, you know, and really kind of see, oh, you know, yes, I was ADHD all along. And, you know, certainly when I was young, you know, I grew up in the 80s. Yeah, there was ADHD, but it was a very dramatic and negative, had very negative connotations. Like there was something seriously wrong with you. You know, you know, I certainly I had trouble saying that to myself for, you know, while I probably could have said that, you know, many years ago. But it's not really now, you know, in this perhaps post-COVID era where, you know, it's okay and it's not only acceptable, but you know, it's thinking differently is not necessarily a bad thing. Now, taking that to research, you know, I've I've always felt like there's been certain strengths I've had as a researcher. One of which is, I would have said before this, I take jumbles of stuff and I put it together in a way that people haven't put together before. And that's the analysis part of research, even the conversation having. Now I know it's divergent thinking, which is actually a part of ADHD, and as well as hyperfocus. Another superpower, perhaps, for good or for bad, to get lost in an activity that you enjoy. And I love my user research. Certainly for me, I've realized that some of the reasons that I've enjoyed it, are specifically around ADHD. I will actually also throw in the little bit of this, little bit that I've done as a freelancer since 2008 has been very enjoyable for me. And part of that is you never get bored. You never lose your focus, but you're always doing something else. And when I reframe perhaps, a lot of my career that way, I realized that I ended up in something that was just right for me. Because of the ADHD without actually, you know, realizing that was the case, but just kind of trying different jobs and different experiences and kind of landing where I did.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing, Cory. And I think it is quite inspiring to hear actually how you turn something that, or your view of how, of viewing something that historically or like generically isn't necessarily considered a positive into really a strength and a positive for UX research.
I mean, I think it's something certainly, very, very valuable, very critical. I'd encourage people to build their empathy skills, and just be nice to everyone around you. And that does build your empathy. Inherent in that is, building your empathy skills. But people need nice right now and people need empathy. I feel like more than ever, in the last couple of years, is really, it's just that thing that just adds so much value to everyone around you. So yeah, I'll end with I'll say, certainly on this topic, I've got that LinkedIn Learning course and a variety of others as well. If anyone wants the big story, or at least the hour and 6 minute, I don't know, whatever it is, hour or so story on that. But really beyond that, I just say, keep keep doing what you're doing. I think this is going to be a good year for the field. I think we've seen a lot of layoffs last year and so on, but I think things are going to be on the upswing now. So there's something to be happy about too, to provide that baseline for the empathy.
Thank you, Cory. Then I guess we will just end things here. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Great. Well, thank you. It was great to be talking with you today. So yeah, I enjoyed it.